The annual pre-budget economic survey, compiled by Principal Economic Advisor Sanjeev Sanyal this year, starts by highlighting India's agile policy response to the COVID-19 shock. The agile framework is based on feedback loops and real-time monitoring of actual outcomes, differing from the conventional waterfall strategy of introducing front-loaded stimulus packages. The agile approach is aided by 80 high-frequency indicators in an environment of extreme uncertainty such as now. The survey reverted to the single-volume format after 8 years as the two-volume format was becoming unwieldy, according to Sanyal. The economic survey projects India's GDP to grow 8 to 8.5% next fiscal, supported by widespread vaccine coverage, gains from supply-side reforms, robust export growth, and the availability of fiscal capacity to ramp up capital expenditure when required. The forecast is below the IMF's projection of 9%. The survey states that vaccination should not be seen merely as health response, but as a macroeconomic indicator for now. The GDP projection is based on the assumption that there will be no further debilitating pandemic-related economic disruption, monsoon will be normal, withdrawal of global liquidity by major central banks will be orderly, global supply chain disruptions will steadily ease over the course of the year, and oil prices will be in the range of $70 to $75 per barrel. While the first four assumptions seem rational, the fifth on oil prices looks hopeful as analysts expect Brent crude to average at around $80 per barrel this year, or even higher due to geopolitical risks emanating from Eastern Europe. Brent topped $90 last week for the first time since 2014 and may go up to $120 over the next few months. However, the economic survey does say that India needs to be wary of imported inflation, especially from elevated global energy prices. Economists Madan Sabnavis and Dharmakirti Joshi spoke to us on the key takeaways from the economic survey.
Okay, the economic survey presented today presents a very positive picture of the economy, both for the year gone past, that is 21-22, as well as for 22-23. But I think the interesting part is that for 22-23, the number of 8 to 8.5% is interesting. Because we and Bank of Baroda had actually a projection of 7.5%. The IMF has something like 9%. So I think the government is being fairly conservative. They're very gung-ho about investment picking up. So I think it's going to be a combination of investment and also the pent-up demand, which probably did not materialize fully in 21-22, which is going to play out in 22-23. If crude oil prices remain high, it would necessarily mean problems on the currency, interest rates, and probably it would go on inflation and finally on interest rates too. But I think it's a fairly reasonable assumption, 70-75 to make for the full year. And they're looking at inflation more in the region of around 5.5%. Overall, we can look at the budget growing at around 13.5%. That would be the GDP growth rate which the government will assume. The fact that the economic survey says that there's a lot of fiscal space which is available, I think it's based on the fact that growth will be high, tax collections will be high, and the government needs to just use this additional support which you're getting from higher tax revenue in the form of higher expenditure. So the focus is, of course, on capital expenditure. One interesting thing is that the economic survey also says that banks are very well capitalized, which means that the burden on the government to do any kind of recapitalization of banks will not be required this year.
Well, I think the economy is in a recovery mode. I think they are talking of 8 to 8.5% GDP growth in 22-23. Given that the new risks are in the horizon, and some of them are already playing out, like high crude prices. Also, I think geopolitical risks are heightened. And on top of that, the monetary policies across the systemically important central banks, I think, are about to turn. I think all these things do create headwinds to growth. So I would say that the risk to outlook is currently loaded downwards.
Interestingly, the economic survey uses satellite imagery to highlight India's infrastructural growth. For example, satellite photos of nighttime luminosity between 2012 and 2021 shows the expansion of electricity supply, economic activity, and urban expansion. Other images show the extent of urban expansion in certain localities of cities like Gurugram, Bengaluru, and Mumbai over time. The survey acknowledges that India's economic response to the pandemic emphasized more on supply-side reforms than on the demand side. Some of these include production-linked incentive schemes, removal of retrospective tax, liberalized guidelines for BPO sector, telecom sector reforms, and revised definition of MSMEs. Whether the budget will offer demand-boosting measures such as cutting income or fuel taxes and enhancing income tax deductions will be known in a few hours.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.